So, Tulsi tackled a question that has been longstanding on everyone's mind. It doesn't matter what camp you're in, and it doesn't really matter even if you're in both of the camps. She answered what makes her different than Bernie Sanders. And her answer, even though it has been articulated by other people like myself, hearing it come from her just gave me all the more confidence that she is correct. Take a listen.
You from the 2016 primary when Bernie Sanders ran for president. Just listening to you today, I feel like you have very similar beliefs and principles in terms of how we see turning this country around. And I'm so grateful because I believe it is unity between people who care about this country and will make a difference. I just want to give you an opportunity to speak about how you feel, what separates you from Bernie Sanders, since you're both running this time.
Yeah.
And second, I have a second question also, and that is, I understand you practice the faith of Hinduism, and I'm wondering how that affects how you work as a politician and how it affects your decision making.
Thank you. Bernie remains a good friend, and I think he brings such an important voice to this country and the conversations that we're having. My decision to run for president was really based on that recognition that the most important job that a president has is as commander-in-chief. So the experiences that I have of serving as a soldier, for almost 15 years, of being deployed to the Middle East and seeing and experiencing firsthand the cost of war and the consequences of the failed policies of this country directly, firsthand. I am not someone who is going to go into the White House and sit back and rely on the foreign policy establishment in Washington to tell me what to do. I don't have to. That is what differentiates me from every other candidate who's running for president right now, is because I'm walking in on day one with that experience, both as a soldier directly, but also as a member of Congress who served on the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs committees for years, who's engaged with leaders of other countries, who's held the feet to the fire of people like the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I'm not intimidated by the stars that someone wears on their shoulders.
All right, Tulsi, relax. You ain't got to get all snappy. Get a little attitude too there. That's all right, though. I like it. I like the confidence. Because I don't need them. I got this. Don't worry about it. Y'all just stay over there. But in all seriousness, did she say something wrong? So I first want to discuss the point about commander-in-chief. Now, she says that the president's most important job is to be the commander-in-chief. And I think that it's important to distinguish that there is a difference, right? Some people don't know that, but militarily, there's a difference. There's a reason why almost all of the initial presidents, except for a couple, and the majority of presidents have had some military experience, and that has been translated throughout the centuries and the decades. Even now, right? They kind of expect you to have some military experience, and the only reason that is not the case is it's a recent trend that not having military experience is okay. Right? Back in the day, that was one of the knocks against Obama and one of the pluses for John McCain. They tried to use that with George Bush as well, although he wasn't really, he was in, but he was apparently he was like a National Guards dodger, like not National Guardsman, but a war dodger, something like that. Trump was a draft dodger. In 20, maybe even 10, well, not 10 years ago, definitely 20 or 30 years ago, Trump would have been crucified for being a draft dodger, running in the Republican Party. And the Republicans would have done it themselves. But we're in a different age now. So ironically enough, having a service member is a shock to the system for a lot of people. It's weird how that's the case, but it seems to be so. I've heard people say, well, how can you be progressive on foreign policy? How can you be populist, if you will, on foreign policy if you're a soldier? And any veteran, including myself, will tell you, if you've ever seen war, if you've ever experienced it, if you've ever known anyone to have seen war and to have actually been involved in it, have had bullets flying at your head, that damn near sometimes can give you, if you see it through the right lens, and it can give you more qualifications to govern on foreign policy than anyone else. And so commander-in-chief is the military aspect of the presidency. And that is why officers, when they walk by in the army, they have to salute. That is also why an officer, a lot of people don't know this, an officer, not enlisted, is not allowed to have an opinion on whether or not the commander-in-chief is doing a quote-unquote great job. In other words, you can be prosecuted under UCMJ, which is the Uniform Code of Military Justice, for saying any disparaging remarks about any given president because of that commander-in-chief aspect. Now, the commander-in-chief is so the vice president. So first of all, let me make a distinction here. So there's a commander-in-chief of the military side, and then there's a president, which is the domestic side. The operative word in president is preside, because you are just there to preside over the existing democratic republic. You are not supposed to be the final say. Rather, you're supposed to be a medium. You're supposed to be the guide. You're supposed to make sure that our democracy is functioning correctly by enabling other parts of the government, whether it be municipal, state, or federal, to do their job effectively. So just like a president has a VP, what's often not analogized is the fact that the commander-in-chief's VP is the Secretary of State, which is why many people say that the Secretary of State is the second most powerful position in the country. Some are in the world, really. And some would even say that it's much more powerful than the vice presidential position. So the the Secretary of State is basically, like I said, the commander-in-chief junior. That's why Hillary Clinton got the stamp to do basically anything she wanted to overseas, because she was fulfilling, unfortunately for veterans, she was fulfilling that commander-in-chief position that Barack Obama had little to no experience in, and therefore was allowing Hillary to take over when he shouldn't have. Tulsi is in a very unique position right now, because she has because of the length of the war in Iraq, she has recent deployment experience. She was recently, she is still a member of the Army National Guard. She is a major in the Army National Guard. That is an 04. That's the fourth level in the officer category. She has combat experience. She's seen the pain. She often talks about the fact that she has to read the names off the lists every morning to see if anybody in her battalion was killed. When you have to plug those wounds, it's a whole different perspective for you. So when she says that she doesn't need to sit back and listen to the deep state, listen to quote unquote foreign policy advisors, the neocons, that's a big deal. Because what is one of the main knocks that I have against Bernie? If there's only a few that I have against him, this is one of the main knocks that I have against him. And this is indeed what separates her, which is once again, indeed, why they don't want her to win, which is once again why you need to stop what you're doing right now and go and donate to Tulsi Gabbard's campaign, because what she said about the foreign policy and her not having to listen to those advisors who were literally there to steer her wrong. They're not there to prevent war. They're there to make sure that the defense contractors are able to make sales to the United States government so that those advisors can get kickbacks. Tulsi understands something that unfortunately Bernie Sanders fundamentally misunderstands. And that is that the FBI, the CIA, all the intelligence agencies basically, and anybody who is in offspring of those intelligence agencies, whether it be in the media, whether it be in politics, etc., those people are not on the side of the average American citizens. Those people are not patriots. Those people don't work for us. And Bernie comes from the old guard, where no matter how bad things may seem, no matter how many mistakes, quote unquote, that these people may make, like weapons of mass destruction, right? He believes that at the end of the day, they're at least patriotic, and they are making their grandest attempt to do what is in the best interest of America and its citizens. However, that is not the case. It has not been the case for 70 plus years. Some would argue it hasn't been the case basically since Cecil Rhodes got his way and united the elites of Great Britain and the elites like J.P. Morgan of America. Like, it hasn't been that way for a long time. World War I was manufactured. We all were told the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the reason that World War I started. And even in history class, anyone who was actually paying attention during our World War I lessons looked at each other and they were like, hold on, there was a whole world war started because of some Archduke? He's like the heir to the German throne or something? Well, no. Well, was he the heir to the Russian regime? Well, no. Well, then who the hell was he? He was the Archduke of Austria-Hungary. Well, why was Germany attacked then? Because they don't tell you those details, they just tell you to memorize. So you regurgitate. But they don't talk about the fact that Great Britain saw Germany as a threat. And the inner circle of Great Britain saw Germany as an economic threat, much like we see with financial the financial side of the deep state in the United States. They then, Cecil Rhodes, the Rhodes Scholarship guy, the scholarship that Rachel Maddow got. He was the one who sparked the war in South Africa, set up the apartheid there. He was the one who worked with J.P. Morgan to fund and finance Theodore. So like these factors all play, the reason I'm bringing this up, because these factors all play a part in what we see now. George W. Bush's great grandfather was on the Council of the War Industries board. And that's how they got their millions. So these people are nefarious because like that whole, do you know what that board was? That board was a board that was actually created to make sure that we constantly are in a wartime economy and how to carry that over a course of decades and eventually a century, which is where we're at now. Because there was like 20,000 plus millionaires and billionaires made from World War II or from World War I, which is why there was so much incentive to allow our companies in the United States to create subsidiaries in Nazi Germany, because everybody made money off of it. That is the ultimate goal. Tulsi understands that. Bernie has a blind spot in that regard, and unfortunately, it doesn't look like that blind spot is being guarded or covered down for yet. Now, if he wins, of course, he's bringing Tulsi onto his staff. So that's going to be a huge difference, in my opinion, from the rhetoric that we're seeing now. However, Tulsi is already ready and set to go in regards to foreign policy. And that's a huge, huge, huge difference between Tulsi and Bernie Sanders. And so it was great hearing that directly out of Tulsi's mouth rather than just, us articulating it for her or speculating how she may feel she's different. Because like I said, when it comes to domestic policy, they're almost identical. However, Tulsi is better on a few things when it comes to domestic policy. Introduce election justice legislation. Introduce protections for the LGBTQ community to make sure that they have the civil rights protections that like a black person would get or a woman would get, disabled person, things like that. They get those protections so that LGBTQ community is not discriminated against when it comes to housing, work environments, et cetera, et cetera. That's fantastic, actually. Stop Arming Terrorists Act. Why? Because she understands that we fund Al-Qaeda right now in Syria. She's come out and said this. The Stop Financing Terrorism Act. Same thing. So domestically, she does have a few, she has a few points on Bernie. However, on the Senate side, Bernie has introduced some things that he has on Tulsi. So they're kind of dead even in the amount and the impact of the legislation that they're introducing. I personally give Tulsi a small leg up because the election justice legislation is probably the most important legislation that she's introduced, and it got no traction except for, I think, Ro Khanna. Even Bernie didn't promote that legislation, which was unfortunate. But when it comes to foreign policy, it's not even close. You have to be willing to say things like we're supporting Al-Qaeda, because that's not an extraneous belief. That's not an extraneous opinion. It is a well-known fact in military circles. We've been known this. We get trained with this information in basic training. If you're part of an intel brigade, then you definitely know this information, because this is all information you have to know before you get deployed. We know, we trained Osama because Osama was supposed to be an ally as part of the Saudi Arabian royal family, because we are allies with them. These are things that you know through experience, and it's hard to understand it or internalize it and then translate that into a foreign policy unless you've kind of been through it, right? Because it's hard to once again, it's almost inconceivable to people to think that we fund Al-Qaeda. Stephen Colbert totally ignored it whenever Tulsi said it, because it was just his brain didn't process it. But if you've been there, you know. If you see the patterns, if you see the connections, you know. You know it to be true. It's unfortunate, but it is factual. There needs to be somebody who can articulate it, who can use and lean on their experiences to help the American people understand why this is of dire consequence to the domestic policies that Bernie wants to pass. Because the reason we don't have a lot of money, the excuses that we're hearing, oftentimes, even when it comes to election fraud, people, that oftentimes comes down to the military-industrial complex. Whether it's about foreign policy, whether it's about climate change, election rigging, all of it, renewable energy, all of it. A lot of this all comes back to the military-industrial complex. Tulsi has a good grip on that. I was very pleased to hear her answer. So like the video, go donate to Tulsi right now. We need to get her on that debate stage. Leave a comment below. And remember, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace. Thank you for watching that segment of Mi Casa es Su Casa. Help us reach our goal of 500 patrons. You can do so by donating as little as $1 by clicking on the Patreon link in the description below. Don't forget, join us on Roku and JustNForm. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook as well. And remember, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace.